Hello, friends. Welcome to the Brave Writer Podcast, where we offer professional development for parent educators. I'm Melissa Wiley. My co-host, Julie Bogart, is away this week, so you get a solo episode from me. And here's what I did. I surveyed my family, and we put together a list of some of our favorite activities, materials, routines that really worked for us over the years. As a reminder, I have 6 kids, ages 30 to 17, so I'm still homeschooling my youngest. So that means I have a big pool of years to draw from. And we had a lot of fun kind of brainstorming together about things that we especially loved or that really worked for us. Now, some of our favorite things are things I've shared in recent episodes, so I'm not going to repeat those, like geocaching. Hello, I think I mention it every 5th episode, so I won't do that again. But these are just a collection of things that worked beautifully for us at various times. And as I put together this list, I will say there was such a spread among my kids that there were times my youngest was like, wait, what are you talking about? I never heard of that. And my oldest had not experienced some of the things that the younger ones loved the most. So this isn't something that I did with all kids all the time. These are a bunch of things that we loved that worked for us. I'm going to start with reading. I often have surprised people when they ask, what did you use to teach reading? And I say, well, I never actually taught, in air quotes, reading, as in I didn't use a reading curriculum or do this sort of dedicated scheduled reading instruction. However, all of my kids learned to read quite young, including my son who has an intellectual disability. My one child who went to school was reading before he went to school. And in fact, his reading skills were strong enough that it threw the evaluators for a little bit of a loop because he had incredible splinter skills. That's a whole different subject. But my point is, the resources that I'm about to share are something I did use consistently with all 6 of my kids. And this combination of, I'll say, literacy activities worked so well for us. So, okay, first, this one probably goes without saying, read alouds constantly, right? So you can just view that as something undergirding every single thing that happened in every year, every month of our family learning adventure. We always had a lot of read alouds happening. And the more you read aloud to kids, the more they get cadences of language in their heads. And that does help them make the jump to independent reading. We read aloud even when our kids are older. In fact, my husband and I went through in our first year of marriage, reading aloud to each other, like all of our own favorite childhood books. So you're never too old for a read aloud. But these are 3 specific resources that we used that I think are the reason, in addition to read alouds, that helped my kids all become strong readers. Number 1 is signing time. I don't know if you know about these incredible videos. Signing Time is a sign language program for families, for kids, and all of the learning happens through songs. And here's the thing. Okay, so one of my sons is hard of hearing. He's worn hearing aids since infancy. We were actually learning sign language as a family before he was born. I had ordered some early childhood sign videos, like when my oldest was about 3 years old, just for fun. I thought it was just fun to start learning. And it turned out to be such a useful skill for the whole family, especially when the kids were babies and toddlers. I think the benefits of teaching sign language to babies are widely known now. We were lucky that it came our way in those early days so that by the time my son was born, and we actually, to our surprise, had a child with severe hearing loss, sign language, or at least the vocabulary that you use with young children, was already a part of our days. And it was right around that point in time that we discovered these particular videos, Signing Time with Alex and Leah. And Because the songs are engaging and easy to memorize, and you're watching and learning the signs, but the words are also on the screen, what happened is that was incredible reinforcement for my young children. Doing a sign with their hands, there's that kinesthetic component, seeing the word visually, it all worked together. So not only did we as a family learn the sign language that we needed to communicate with my very young son, he became later, he's 100% verbal and chose not to pursue sign as his spoken language, although one of his siblings is working on ASL certification as a career path. So the sign language itself was an important part of our family education, but it also had this unexpected side benefit of those specific videos helping teach my kids to read because of that visual reinforcement happening over and over. And another aspect of that same kind of visual reinforcement was that we always had the captions turned on when our kids watched TV. So if they were watching, say, Little Bear or Blue's Clues, everybody, whatever their favorite shows were, we always had the captions on. And so they're hearing and they're seeing at the same time. And that just helped them make those connections. Now, we do know now, of course, that it's very helpful to have some kind of grounding in phonics. Reading education in the United States of America has gone through some swings. It went away from phonics toward whole language, and now it seems to be swinging back toward a phonics-based approach. I didn't do a phonics program, but we leaned heavily on the Bob books, which are phonics-based. So those are little tiny, thin, square paperbacks, a wonderful size for a young child is my point. Like they would come in a box of 10, and those 10 books would revolve around a couple of sounds and sound blends. And the illustrations are very, very simple. And the kids just really loved that format. So we would read those books, and those were the books where they did get what would be considered the closest to reading instruction, like a curriculum. But it was done in that casual storytime read aloud fashion. Those 4 components, read alouds, signing time, the Bob books, and watching shows with captions on, those were the tools that catapulted all of my kids into fluent reading. So I'm really happy to share those. And especially, I'm gushing about signing time because it's so meaningful to our family. If you haven't, if you've never experienced those DVDs or videos, I'm sure the whole program is available digitally now, and we'll share a link in the show notes. You're really in for a treat. Okay. My next little category here is things, I called it routines and hooks. For most of my kids' early years, we had a pretty set morning routine. Like when it began, had lots of flexibility depending on when people were waking up and what time of year it was. But there was sort of always a point after breakfast, after everybody was dressed and we had done whatever morning chores we were going to do, we would kick off the homeschooling part of our day with a short little routine that involved songs and stretches and skip counting and poetry. And this was consistent enough that it really formed an anchor for our days, even through our most jumbled periods of life. So I would always start with a little song that had some stretches that went with it, or a little, a little set of movements that my mother-in-law had taught me. She said that when she took my husband to library story time when he was a tiny little boy, they had always begun story time with this particular song. And she showed it to me. And so then I started teaching it to my kids. And that just became this little sweet family tradition that would kick off our day. It was called Bend and Stretch. And it was very short and simple. So if you have a little song or a poem that is meaningful to your family, or that just could become meaningful through repetition, that can be a wonderful way to start the day. There are some households, especially Waldorf-inspired schooling, where it may be a different verse chosen for each season, and it's sort of linked to the season. I think that's another beautiful way to anchor the beginning of your learning time together. After we sang our little bend and stretch song, and that had, the movement in it, so that kinesthetic component was important. We would sometimes add other songs, or we were always working on memorizing a poem. And so we would add a new line every few days, right? And then just run through the whole thing from the top every morning, just starting at the beginning and going all the way through whatever the newest line was. And in that way, we learned so many poems or speeches from Shakespeare without a lot of effort. It was just the simple daily repetition, and it was part of our routine. And the other part of our routine when they were young was skip counting to help them anchor their math facts. So we would do that. I think I've described how sometimes we would do a plank and skip count, and get as high as we could in whatever the number we were skip counting with, while holding one plank. Other times we would use bean bags and toss them to each other, saying the next number in the sequence. As they got older and they were really learning multiplication tables, we were able to just change the wording a little bit. Instead of skip counting, 369, we could turn it into the math problem while tossing the bean bags. So those three things: singing some songs, doing some poetry, doing some skip counting, making sure that some part of it incorporated physical activity. Those were our little kickoff hook for now we're ready to start our day. And at that point, maybe we would move to the table and do some copy work or a page of math problems, something that required some concentration. We also, as a routine, for many, many, many years, we had a daily hour of quiet time right after lunch. I've shared in the past how I would use that time. Often I would just rotate through the kids. So every couple of days, one of them got that chunk of time as one-on-one time with me. And that was really special to us. Sometimes it meant we were reading one special book together. Other times we had different activities that we were doing. And you can also use a daily quiet time as a place to refresh yourself if you need to. The rule for us was everybody went, sat on their beds and they could play with toys or read a book or listen to music, but it was an hour of doing something independently. And as the years passed and screens entered our lives in a bigger way, because in the early days, they didn't have a lot of screen time, my older ones. But once, with my younger set, once we had an iPad and video games and things, we would use quiet time for screen-free time. And I think back to it now, I'm really grateful that we had that routine. It wasn't a decision I made out of any kind of thinking about screen time. It was just this little respite. And I think really when I started it, the main purpose was for me to ensure that I could do one-on-one time with each of my kids at some point in the week. But I think all families can find a space where that kind of quiet reading time can exist. Maybe it's just the whole family is in one room reading their own book together, or looking at pictures or coloring in a coloring book. I think if it works in your day, even just a few times a week, it's a really wonderful anchor for giving people space to be alone with their thoughts, or to entertain themselves, or to have that dedicated reading time that it can get hard to make space for in the incredibly busy and resourceful world that we live in. We also, our family realized that because my husband and I both worked from home, our kids didn't have a very strong sense of weekends as being different. So we had special Saturday mornings. I may have talked about this in the past. I won't go into too much detail, but that was the time of Saturday mornings. My kids got sugary cereals and Saturday morning cartoons. And that was a very fun way for our family to kind of, stay connected to the larger culture in that rhythm of the passage of days. Otherwise, our days all seemed very similar. Nobody went to school and nobody left the house to go to work. But we made Saturdays feel sort of different.
That's right. It is time for Brave Writer's biggest event of the year, the Brave Writer Book Reveal. What is the Brave Writer Book Reveal? It is our favorite time of year where we throw a little confetti and reveal a whole lot of books. Every year, the Brave Writer team selects new book titles for our literature and grammar programs. You and your kids are invited to attend the live reveals where we hint at what the titles are, everyone furiously guesses in the chat, and then we reveal the books. Also, the book reveals are not the only thing happening on June 1st and 2nd. We have exciting news about the literature singles, about our writing projects programs, and how we teach writing in high school. We will be revealing more than just books on June 1st and 2nd. You can register at the link in the show notes. We will be covering ages 5 to 10 on Monday, June 1st at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. And on day 2, we will be talking to families with kids between the ages of 11 and 18, noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. I will be there, so will Dawn. We can't wait to see you and your kids. Register early. Space is limited to the first 500, and we will have replays available. And now, back to the show.
Other routines for us involved seasonal read-alouds. Now, I think a lot of families do this. It was really big on the message boards in the late 90s and the early 2000s. Families would have, whatever their holidays that they celebrated. So we always had Christmas books that I would bring out at the beginning of Advent, and it was like our Christmas picture book collection, and I tried to add to it each year so that after a few years, we had a stack of wonderful picture books that we only read at that time of year, and then after Christmas, I would pack them away. And that went on for, the whole time my kids were little, and was a favorite family tradition. We also had my husband would do a holiday read aloud. So the best Christmas pageant ever was a family favorite, and he would read that every other year. And that was to the whole family. Like even, the college kids would sit in and listen when he was reading it to the younger kids. Other years, it might be a Christmas carol or a different, longer sort of winter story. But that was a very, very fun recurring event for us. And then also another hook that we had was car trips. I'm thinking now specifically of on the way to piano lessons, we always listened to a CD of Latin vocabulary that was sort of done in a chant form, like not Gregorian chants, just like amo, amas, amat, da 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 da. So it was rhythmic and made the vocabulary stick in the kids' heads. Not all of the kids experienced this because they didn't all do Latin, but during the window when they were taking piano lessons and doing Latin, that was a great little routine for us. Get in the car to go to piano, put on the same thing, and that was that reinforcement of vocabulary. You could do that with so many other things, which leads me to my songs category of things I want to share. Because songs or rhythmic vocabulary memorization tracks are one of the big ways that my kids learned anything that you really needed to learn by rote, right? Commit to memory by rote. All right. So these were some of our favorite musical resources. I'm a Gen X kid, so I have to start with Schoolhouse Rock. Those remain some of the best musical resources for learning math facts, grammar terms, American history. Some of the U.S. history stuff is a bit outdated now, but there are still some that are useful. And science. We definitely learned a lot about various, like the circulatory system from Schoolhouse Rock. So if you haven't tapped into that resource, you're missing out. It's delightful. And you'll remember the preamble to the Constitution for the rest of your life. Another one that I have mentioned often is Horrible Histories. This was a show that came out of the UK. It is available online these days, and it was a music video approach to UK history. Our favorite and the most useful to us was the English Monarchs song. And I have shared before about how we used that song as a way to help anchor certain historical events. We could kind of see who was the king or queen of England at the time. And now we have a better sense of where in history the event took place, even if it was in a whole different part of the world. Same with US presidents. Our US president's song came from a CD called Singin' Smart, Singin' without the G. And that too is available. It's in our bookshop, actually. So that US president's song, it doesn't go, up to current. I can't even remember who I think it might end with George W. Bush. But for getting the first 40 plus presidents in your mind, that was a great resource. Also memorizing the US states and the capitals. And I remember there was a song that had the bones of the human body. So those were some that were really, really helpful to us, and we would listen to that a lot. Probably, however, our favorite thing to listen to was Snoopy the Musical. And that probably sounds funny coming on this educational podcast because it's not a specifically educational resource, but I often think of it as like the Rabbit Trailers soundtrack. There's a song in Snoopy the Musical, which is related to You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, but it's not the same play. It's a different play. There's a song called Clouds where all the Peanuts kids are describing what they see in the clouds, and it is all so elaborate, the pyramids of Khufu, Prometheus, the Sistine Chapel, the fall of Rome. You could use that one song as like a curriculum jumping off point for a whole year, I think. My kids loved that Broadway soundtrack, and we listened to it all the time. So, of course, I had to share it here. And speaking of Broadway, another big hit for us, and I would put this on if we needed to do a big house cleaning. I would put on Annie, and we would start with Hard Knock Life because there is nothing like cleaning while you're singing It's a Hard Knock Life. And that was the way that we could, instead of feeling grumpy about it, enter into it and turn it into a performance. So those are some of our favorite musical resources. I could go on and on and on. And in fact, I'm hoping that in an upcoming episode, I can interview my very own husband who taught a history of rock and roll class to our kids. And I would love to get him to chime in on the music aspect of our homeschooling adventure because he's done an incredible job with that. Okay. I am going to move on to a few geography resources. The first one is somebody dear to our family. He's called Mr. Putty. When I say our family, I mean my 3 oldest kids because my poor 3 youngest never really experienced Mr. Putty, and here's why. Mr. Putty, that's Putty, was just a little flag in a lump of putty that we would stick to our globe. So whenever we were reading a book or learning about something in history or science, we would move Mr. Putty to the appropriate spot on the globe. And the kids loved to do this. We kicked off so many read aloud sessions this way. Who can find Iceland? Who can find the Nile, right? And they would move Mr. Putty and stick him in that spot. And we watched him travel all around the globe. And it was wonderful. And the only reason my younger kids have no memory of Mr. Putty is that they were still very little when I knocked the globe off the shelf and it broke off its stand. And from then on, we just would, it wasn't self-standing. And so we couldn't stick Mr. Putty on it anymore. And we never replaced that globe. It was so silly. However, those younger kids did get something else that was the same kind of exciting geography connection resource. So I don't feel too bad that I literally dropped the ball with Mr. Putty. The younger kids, for a couple of years, we were active with an organization called Post Crossing. I'll put the link in the show notes. Post Crossing is a website. You register with it. And the way it works is everybody who registers has shared their address. And this is people all over the world. And when you sign up, you are given an address. for somebody somewhere, and you send them a postcard. And when they register that they received it, then your address goes out to another person, not that same person, somebody else, somewhere else in the world. And then you get a postcard. And you can do, if I remember correctly, you could do up to like 5 postcards at a time. So there was a period where we were getting postcards in the mail, like at least one a week. It was so exciting. They really did come from countries all over the place. And we had our big world map on the wall, and we would stick the postcard somewhere on the wall and then connect the postcard with like a red piece of yarn to the spot where it had come from. So that was very, very exciting to see that grow and to get these beautiful cards and see the stamps from all over the world. Really, really fun little interval in our learning adventure. Another geography resource that my kids learned a lot from was a game called Stack the States and Stack the Countries. And we were just talking the other day about how many of us could stand to review some of the continents on Stack the Countries, because that was really the best resource that we had ever come across for learning the names and locations of countries around the world. So I highly recommend that app, Stack the States and Stack the Countries. I should also mention here something I talked about a couple of weeks ago. If you heard that episode where I shared about Journey North Mystery Class as one of our favorite geography learning experiences, I gave all the lowdown on that in that episode, so I'll let you jump back to it if you're interested. But it was a way that we learned about countries around the world, solving these clues to locate them. And then the piece that I don't think I talked about that time is that when we did it with a local group, and we did this for, 5 or 6 years in a row, we had a small group of families that we participated in this activity with. And each family was sort of identifying one country. And then we would all come together at the end. Everybody would make some food from that country, and we would have a big potluck. That's the piece I forgot to talk about. And that was a very important piece. Clearly, every child's favorite part of the activity was that last day. Sometimes they would dress up in costumes, but it was really all about the food. Speaking of food, some of the things that came up when my family was reminiscing was they were like, oh, remember the time? Oh, do you remember the time? And so many of those times, it turned out were, times that mom was unprepared or caught by surprise and showed up for a thing with a hastily cobbled together snack, shall we say. And the fact that those are some of their brightest memories, I'm sharing this one. It's not a resource. It's not an activity. It's just a reality. Sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves to do everything perfectly or put all this preparation time in. And sometimes I want to say, just like your hastily cobbled together attempt, it turns out to be the biggest hit of all. What am I talking about? It's like this. We moved to California and signed up for piano lessons, and it was group classes. So we knew some of the families that were in the class, but we didn't know that they were going to a park after class to have lunch together. Was I prepared for this? No. Had I packed lunches? Of course not. I stopped at a gas station on the way to the park, and I bought a loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter. I think I bought some honey and a bag of mini marshmallows. And I got a knife from the hot dog section, and showed up to park day with where all the other moms had packed beautiful homemade lunches. And I take out a loaf of gas station bread, and I had paper cups in the car. So there you go. There's my pro tip. Always keep a package of paper cups in your vehicle. And I made peanut butter and honey sandwiches and served them on gas station napkins, and everybody got a little cup of mini marshmallows. And my kids remember that as this glorious episode of childhood. So there you go. A similar incident, this one in my own home. You'd think I would be more on top of things, but I was not. I it was the first week of the Shakespeare Club that I was offering. And this Shakespeare Club, my oldest was 11. The kids were 12 and under, right? This was young kids. And I had set it up as a drop-off activity with the other moms, drop off your kids at my house. We're going to do fun Shakespeare stuff for a couple of hours. It did not occur to me that the kids would be expecting to be fed. Everybody, of course, just took it for granted you would get a snack. If you went to anybody else's house, of course you got a beautiful snack. I didn't have like a snack prepared, and I'm not a kitchen-y person. And in my panic of like, oh no, what am I going to do? I've got to feed these children. Suddenly, I went to our Saturday morning cereal stash, and I grabbed a bag of store brand Lucky Charms, and I put them in a giant bowl, and I got paper cups. And everybody got a paper cup of dry Lucky Charms as their snack. And you know what? It was an incredible hit. They loved it. So there you go. I don't know if you remember in the book Beezus and Ramona, the first of the Ramona the Pest stories, Ramona surprises her mom one day by announcing that she's invited her whole like nursery school class over for a party one Saturday morning. And mom is totally unprepared. And that's not like her. She was a kitchen-y mom, unlike me. But I think they served like fig Newtons and apples, and it was a whole little madhouse escapade, very stressful for the mom and the big sister, Beezus. But the little kids loved it. I think until somebody said the fig Newtons were stuffed with worms, and things went downhill from there. But at least when I was, serving gas station sandwiches or dry Lucky Charms to children in my care, I could say that I was participating in a literary tradition, right? We can tell ourselves that. Another time, and by this time I had assimilated that it was not always necessary for me to knock myself out with a big baking extravaganza in order to bring a treat to an event. We had 2 piano recitals a year, and there was a potluck afterward, and it was on the sweets and treats side of things. And so everybody would bake cookies and cupcakes. And one year, I just didn't have it in me to do the baking. I went to the grocery store and I bought a few bags of those circus animal cookies, with the little like rainbow sprinkles on top that I had loved when I was a kid. And I put them in a big bowl and I brought them. And let me tell you, I actually felt almost guilty because every other mother had worked so hard on the baking. And the kids, and not just the kids, the dads went bananas over the circus animal cookies. And then the next recital, 6 months later, I show up, I had actually like baked something, and there was big disappointment. The kids, and again, some of the fathers were like, oh man, where's the circus? So from then on, oh, you bet, I only ever brought circus animal cookies anywhere. So that's my little secret I give to you.
Ditch the desk and rediscover the joy of science. Is your spring homeschool routine feeling a little stale? When the sun starts shining and the warm weather is drawing you outdoors, it's the perfect time to pivot, to lean into unit studies, and to breathe new life into your homeschool day. Brave Writer has a free guide called a Build a Science Unit Study with Brave Writer, and it shows you how to turn your child's natural wonder into an engaging learning adventure that combines subjects for both ease and delight. Imagine checking off those end-of-the-year boxes and knowing you've covered science in a meaningful way. Head over to the show notes where we've got a link for you so that you can download a free copy of our Brave Writer Build a Science Unit Study that is just perfect for spring. And now, back to the show.
My kids also, while we're talking about food, they mentioned our bean feasts. Okay, bean feast is a term that I think I picked up from some British novel somewhere, or maybe a Betsy Tacy book. Like, is that what they called it when in Carney's house party, when the girls were in college and they would get together like for a midnight snack and everybody would bring whatever they had? They called it a bean feast. Maybe it was in Little Women. I don't know. In our family, a bean feast means instead of making dinner, we're going to rummage and put together a kind of snacky appetizer-y meal of cheese and crackers and fruit and really whatever, nuts, whatever we come up with. Over the years, we began, I would call it a bean feast. If I had shopped at Trader Joe's, I would always just buy a baguette and some bruschetta and some goat cheese, a couple of things like that. And so we leveled up our bean feasts. And these days, that's really what a bean feast means. It's like once a month. We do kind of a cold Trader Joe's meal. But my kids brought that up, like all of them named Bean Feast when I was surveying everybody. So I think it's worth mentioning here as one of those, like, the pressure's off me. We can just rummage and put together a cold, snacky, appetizer-y kind of dinner. And another food-related thing that came up for us once we moved to Portland, for up until COVID, it kind of didn't come back after the lockdown, but for the first few years we were here, local parks in the summer would have free lunch for all school-aged children. And so my young kids loved that. We lived pretty close to a park that was one of the ones that offered it, and they could go to the park and get their little box lunch and play. And it was just a wonderful service the city provided to all school-aged children, no matter what their educational situation was. So if you happen to live in an area that has something like that, it's worth looking into and seeing if it's something you want to incorporate. Okay, let me jump back to math. I have two little math tips and tricks to share. Julie and I just recently did a whole episode on math, but these are some things I did not remember to mention. One is just my youngest mentioned this when I was taking my survey. It was just about one piece of learning to tell time on a clock, an analog clock. This is something we got from the Matthew C. program. The folks who put that program together, the way that Steve Demme described the part of learning how to tell time where you can't quite tell, it looks like the hour hand is pointing at the new hour, but it's not the new hour yet. He equated that to birthdays. So you can say to a kid, imagine, it's a month before your 10th birthday. How old are you? Still 9. What about a week before your birthday? You're still 9. What about a day before your birthday? You're still 9. What about a minute before your birthday? You're still 9. And then you're not 10 until on your birthday. That helped my kids visualize when you're looking at a clock and it's showing, say, 9:55. And so the hour hand really looks like it's almost pointing at the 10. It can be very confusing for kids to figure out what hour they're looking at. You can help them see, the minute hand is still, it hasn't pointed straight up yet. It's pointing at the, toward the 11. So it's 55 or 56 or 57. So it's still not your birthday. It's still 9:55, 9:56 until it's straight up. And now it's the new thing. That one little tip helped all of my kids grasp that piece of learning to tell time on a clock. And I will say that when I see classroom teachers today talking about one of the skills they wish that they had more time to spend on with their students, and a lot of students, just never really master it anymore, is analog time telling. We can definitely lean into that and make sure our kids are equipped to tell time on a clock. The other resource is an app called DragonBox. We discovered it when it was quite new, and it was DragonBox Algebra. It is a game on your phone or iPad that you're learning algebraic concepts and algebraic thinking, but it's aimed at very young kids. I think they may have now 2 levels of the algebra, like under 12 and 12 and up, something like that. We'll put a link in the show notes. I noticed when I looked up to make sure that this was something that still existed, they've added several other things. They have DragonBox Geometry now, and it looks like there's a reading one. There's several kind of math facts-oriented apps that DragonBox now offers. I've only ever, so far, checked out the original DragonBox Algebra app, but it was fantastic in terms of offering a door to algebraic thinking without it feeling like sitting down and doing a math worksheet. And because it was introduced in a, sort of cartoonish way for younger kids, by the time my kids got to algebra, they understood what these concepts we were learning were conveying, because they had already sort of grasped framing puzzles and questions and logic in that way. So those are two great math resources that we loved. And finally, I have just a few hands-on things that came up on the list. I think over the years of doing this podcast, I have shared, dozens upon dozens of our favorite hands-on resources. So I'm trying not to repeat things here, but these were just a few items that came up that I may not have mentioned recently or at all. One, my youngest was really adamant that I talk about the beeswax crayons. Specifically, so he was like, oh, like they were in those tin containers, like Altoids containers, and we used them to decorate the edges of our papers. Well, I had forgotten about that piece of it. When they were little, one of the ways that I would make things like copywork or math feel more fun for the kids is these were the square beeswax crayons, or the rectangular, the block crayons, and just dragging the edge along the border of the paper created this, kind of pretty colorful border. And that just was enough to make the whole activity feel more fun. Another thing, same child around age 6 was really not enjoying handwriting, learning to write, until I remembered that for Christmas many years earlier, my mother had given me this set of dip pens. So these are like pens with, mine had a glass tip. Some, there's other types, but they're carved in a certain way with little channels that kind of hold the ink. So you dip it into an actual inkwell, or, little vial of ink. And it felt very old-timey and special. And all of a sudden, practicing writing letters became fun for that child and not a struggle, just because of this new and different and special and felt kind of grown up resource that we were using. Always mixing up the writing utensils is helpful, but those dip pens, I'm just going to say, they were like an especially big success moment for us. When some of my kids were little, I made each of them a stationery kit. And so it was just a little container that had thank you notes and cute stamps and something to write with and some stickers, and maybe some stationery as well, like some letter writing paper. But the point was, everybody had their own little writing kit. And when it came time to write thank you notes, everybody could take out their kit and they had everything they needed to sit down and write a thank you note or write a letter to somebody. And having it all in one place like that made it easier for me too. Now and then one of my kids would have a pen pal. And when they're little, it takes a lot of mom or parent involvement to make sure that, pen pal correspondence is actually happening on both sides. Having everything in that one place and it was their special thing, was a big boost for us. And then I think this is the last thing on my list. This is definitely hands-on, but I'm using it actually as an example of something different. I want to talk about snap circuits. These are kits that you can buy. And again, I think we might be able to add these to our Brave Writer bookshop. Snap circuits are sort of beginner electrical circuitry project kits. And it comes with everything you need to put together all these little components to learn how circuits work and to make little tiny machines. My youngest loved snap circuits. And so just as a gift idea alone, this is a really good tip. But the unexpected component, and what I really wanted to share, is that one of the big things he got from snap circuits was learning how to read and follow instructions. It was a step-by-step booklet. And of course, I was always there available. If you need help figuring out how to put the thing together, I'm here. You can ask for help. But if your child is already reading, any kind of kit that has instructions, Julie has talked about games, board games being another great way that this can happen. putting reading to practical use by following instructions. Gosh, what a fantastic life skill to give our kids. And we've talked about it in so many other contexts, but this one jumped into my head as like for that particular child, that was the one. I think my oldest, things like crochet patterns were one of the big, like learning how to read and follow instructions. And I've shared that putting together IKEA furniture together was another, learning how to read and follow instructions for other kids. Obviously, cooking, baking is all about following a series of written instructions. But if you have a kid who's into tinkering and electronics, snap circuits, a great hands-on choice. Okay, well, that's what I have on my list. I hope there was something in here that you find of use. And we would always love to hear your best resources, tips, tricks, hacks, routines, favorite memories, anything you want to share with us. And we would love to be able to share those with the rest of our listeners. If you send in your best ideas, we could do a whole episode on our brilliant Brave Writer podcast listeners and all the great ideas that you have brought to your families or things that you have found work really well for you. Thank you for listening, as always. And Julie and I will see you next time.
Okay, that's another Brave Writer episode in the books. Thanks for joining Melissa and me today. We love it when you leave us reviews, when you send us comments via text message. We read them all. We also couldn't do this show without our fabulous production team at Nova or Jeanette Hall, the Brave Writer team member who handles all those administrative details you know nothing about. In the meantime, we hope that you have a fantastic week. Keep going, think well. We're rooting for you.